Creating greater diversity in the boardroom is a really hot topic globally. Many articles point out that diverse boards make better decisions and subsequently perform better than non-diverse boards. Various companies in Europe have mandated numbers of women on boards. While the process in the US continues to remain more traditional, there are signs of increased placement of women onto public and private company boards. A wide variety of organizations are offering board training, but the question remains, what are boards really looking for, and what are the potential paths to a board seat? We have assembled a terrific panel of 4 women who are on multiple boards to briefly present their story. We also have a board search professional who is here to discuss what boards look for in candidates. The session is an outgrowth of feedback that we've received from our survey and other seminars. Many of you are seeking to develop professionally and want to understand better what types of board opportunities beyond nonprofit, especially if you will never become a CEO or CFO. For example, how might a CMO, CIO, or entrepreneur or general counsel think about leveraging her skills in more of an advisory fashion for a private company board? When might a small business owner be considered a candidate for a seat? The panelists will discuss how they built their board portfolios, how the different environments work, and what they've learned as they've served on these different types of boards. We will also ask what they believe are the critical backgrounds and how all of you can make yourself both more visible and attractive as potential board candidates. Therefore, we have 3 objectives today. One is to discuss the professional career experience and the related board appointment process of our panelists. The other is to provide insight on general and niche experience that boards seek. And finally, we want to talk about the critical moves which can be made to become an attractive board candidate. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Tyranny Remick, chair of our Women on Boards Committee this year. Tyranny has been a member of the Chicago Network since 2007. She is a senior client partner and global managing director of Korn Ferry International's Global Consumer Market. She is also a member of the firm's operating committee. This veteran executive search professional has served a wide range of clients, from Fortune 500 companies to entrepreneurial ventures. She helps them develop world-class leadership teams and boards of directors. She also appears frequently on national media outlets including CNBC, CNN, and has appeared in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune as an expert on executive and management issues. Tyranny began her career as an account manager at Leo Burnett, showing once again that interesting and successful careers are not necessarily linear. She received her BA from Princeton, is a director of the Chicago Network, the Lincoln Park Zoo, and is also a Leadership Greater Chicago Fellow. Tyranny will provide us with insight from her perspective as a board recruiter. Please welcome Tyranny.
Thanks, Kate, and welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for your interest in the topic. Some of you may have been present at the seminar that we did in the fall, and it was as a result of that seminar that we realized most of the public press that we read on board and board selection and board opportunities is really focused on large cap public boards, when in fact there's a wide variety of board opportunities out there, both that go to search firm, which we work with, but also, as you'll find out from the panelists that will participate today, they have reached through either former colleagues, former superiors, or friends that know of their skills and their accomplishments. So there's actually quite a wide variety of board service available to executives and available specifically to individuals that may or may not be a CEO or a CFO, which are classic profiles. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is just from a search firm perspective. Board service is something that is typically reviewed on an annual basis as terms come about. So the process of doing a board search tends to be, at least with a search firm, something that's very well orchestrated. There's a calendar, there's a conversation months in advance of someone's term ending, profiles are developed, and a competency set is orchestrated. The search firms are not the only source of candidates, however. Board directors are often solicited for some ideas and information. Friends and colleagues of board members are solicited. Consultants who serve the board or the company are solicited. So what that shares with all of you in the room and others that we work with is that the ability to make yourself aware of an appropriate community to network with and communicate your interest, that you have an interest in serving on a board, and to begin to gain insights on where your experience might fit, where your experience may be a complement to the board that's there. The boardroom activity is heating up. Last year there were over 4,500 public company director seats that were assigned in the year, and it's continuing to grow. We're seeing over 10% of the public board directors are over the age of 70, and that will continue to stay at least 10%, if not increase, over the next several years. What that means is that boards are getting very strategic, and what this is, whether they're a small board, a public board, and in cases of private equity or private boards, looking at their board succession on a more strategic basis and trying to identify where they're going to have needs and how they can build a board composition that will actually be competitive for the company going forward. And as a result, that means there will be more opportunities for a number of executives, both retired and currently working. In addition to the aging, we've also learned that many executives in corporate roles today are very reluctant to take on significant external commitments because of the time demands on their day-to-day job, particularly if they're on an enterprise-wide role, or they're seeing a lot of travel in the work that they do, or they have a lot of commitments within the company they serve in terms of various committees. So increasingly, the currently employed executives are only seeking out one board, as opposed to 5-10 years ago where they may have sought out an additional board from that. What that also requires is that they be very selective, gain approval from their CEO or their chairman that they can do a separate board, and understand that they may have to get approval for what that board looks like as part of their own professional development. There are a number of executives that have been transitioned through either sales of companies, or they've started a business and they've positioned it in such a way that somebody else can run it on a day-to-day basis. Increasingly, those, what we would call business entrepreneurs, are in great demand, particularly for mid-cap boards or private equity boards. They have seen how to manage with a complexity of a business, but they don't necessarily have the same resources of a large cap. They tend to be high growth, creative, oriented individuals that have proven to be very effective in different environments. So the board search activity, while it's heating up, is also expanding the network of places that we're looking for. Jane had asked me to touch base a little bit on the accomplishments, and I think a key for a director is that you have achieved a level of operating performance or a level of expertise in a particular functional area that is recognized not only within your company but by your peers and by your industry as being significant. For example, right now, probably the hottest in-demand director is somebody who understands cybersecurity. It is probably our most active and dynamic segment of board service. This group here we selected for a very specific reason. They represent women who have built board portfolios that include large cap public, small cap, private equity, founder-backed boards, and private boards. And we wanted you to hear their stories because it would be potentially instructional for all of you that are seeking to either add to the board portfolio or begin to initiate a board search process, to understand the differences between those types of companies and the board service, as they are different. What does an advisory board look like that might be different than a large cap public board with very specific governance activities? What are the committee activities that one can get involved in, and what are the time commitments that may be different and they may be the same? So we appreciate all four of them spending the time, and Jane, our moderator. We hope that you will find this to be very engaging and informative, and we look forward to all the questions both at the panel and afterwards. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Kate to introduce Jane.
Before I introduce Jane, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about a survey that the Chicago Network did earlier this winter. I guess it's really spring, but it feels like winter. We wanted to better understand the types of boards our members are on, and we wanted to share some of those results with you as they will help frame today's discussion. What we've learned is that title counts a lot. 20 of the 70 respondents serve on public company boards. Trends in their job titles were overwhelmingly CEO president, retired president or retired CEO, CFO, or retired CFO. Similarly, 24 of our respondents serve on private company boards. While there is much greater opportunity in private or advisory boards, well over half the women held the title CEO, CFO, or EVP. Women need to understand that it is the title more than the training, which will most likely, but not necessarily, propel them to board service. Our survey results are also borne out in the calls that I and member of our Women on Boards committee receive. While most of the searches are looking for women with the titles that we just talked about, in addition to cybersecurity, we're getting calls for members who have significant operating or P&L experience in retail, e-commerce, and marketing. For those who may never hold the title of CEO, COO, CFO, or EVP, there are opportunities. Today's panel is designed in part to help all of us understand the market so that you are empowered to cultivate opportunities given where you are in your careers and your own titles. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator and panelists. Jane Warner, who will serve as today's moderator, has been a member of the Chicago Network since 2007, and she currently serves on the board of directors of Brunswick, Tenneco Inc., and Regal Beloit Corporation, as well as a trustee for the John G. Shedd Aquarium. Prior to ITW, Jane served as president of the Plexus Systems and a VP at Electronic Data Systems. She's also had roles at Textron Automotive, and she began her career in 1974 with GM, serving 20 years at that company with progressive roles of responsibility. Jane has an MBA from Stanford and both an MA and BA from Michigan State University. Jane is joined on the panel by Ann Ziegler. Ann is SVP, CFO, and Executive Committee member of CDW, which is a leading provider of technology products and services for business, government, and education. Prior to joining CDW in 2008, she held a number of executive positions with Sara Lee, including finance, strategy, and general management. Ann earned her bachelor's degree in economics from the College of William and Mary and a law degree from the University of Chicago Business School, or Law School. She serves on the board of directors of Hanesbrand and Groupon. Mary Bagley Veau is currently Chief Marketing Officer and VP of Global Marketing at Northwestern University. She is one of the senior advisors to the president of that institution. Prior to taking her current role at Northwestern, she held the position of Chairman and CEO Americas for Saatchi and Saatchi Worldwide. In 2006, she was named New York Advertising Woman of the Year by the Advertising Women of New York. She serves on the corporate boards of Phillips Van Heusen, a global branded apparel company. You might recognize names like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. She also serves on the board of Host Hotels and Resorts and the Riverside Portfolio Company, Baby Jogger. She holds a BS in Integrated Marketing and Communications from Medill and a BA in English, Phi Beta Kappa from Rutgers. Marla Galchuk is the former CEO of Pampered Chef. She came to Pampered Chef from Kraft Foods, where she worked for 14 years. During her time at Kraft, she held a variety of positions, including EVP and General Manager of Post Cereals and SVP Financial Planning and Investor Relations. Marla is a graduate of Indiana University in Bloomington, and she earned a BS in Science and Accounting, and she got a Master's in Management from Kellogg. She serves on the board of directors of Potbelly Inc., Underwriters Laboratories, and Ocean Spray Cranberries Inc. Rhonda Jordan is a 25-year veteran of Kraft Foods, and she currently serves on the board of Ingredion, Bush Beans and Company best known for the baked beans that we all love, and also Colfax Corporation, which is a multi-platform manufacturing and industry enterprise. At Kraft, Jordan held a variety of marketing and executive positions, including president of Global Health, Wellness, and Sustainability, and president of the U.S. Cheese and U.S. Grocery Business. She has a BA from Northwestern and an MBA from Kellogg. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Jane and our very distinguished panelists.
I don't know. I'll just call names. It's certainly a privilege to be here today and to have an opportunity to moderate a discussion with this panel. I know many of you are very interested in obtaining a board position or maybe a second or third board position, and it's always a curiosity as to how this process works because it is a bit of a mystery. So we hope to answer some of those questions today. I thought what we would do, I've got 5 questions that I will ask the panelists to respond to, and we'll open it to Q&A after that, and hopefully all of you will participate and get some of your many questions answered about how to move forward for yourself personally. So to begin, Anne, why don't we start with you as long as you're first. Can you tell us what your first board opportunity was, and at the time, what your title or role was, and in what organization?
Sure. So it's a little bit of a complicated answer. The first public company independent board I sat on was Unitrin, which is a local company here in Chicago, now called Kemper, multi-brand insurance. I had previously sat on public company boards. At the time, I was an SVP of corporate development at Sara Lee. I had for years, probably 6 years, sat on boards of companies that Sara Lee had a minority investment in. And some of those companies actually happened to go public while I was sitting on the board. So I did have public company board experience, but it was really because Sara Lee had the right to nominate several directors, and I was one of the ones nominated. How I got the Unitrin/Kemper opportunity is I'd say unfortunately an old story. John Bryan, who many of you know had been the chairman and CEO of Sara Lee for years, he was retiring. He was having individual lunches with all the executives, and I had lunch with him, and I said, John, I've been on Sara Lee boards for years. I would love to be on the board of a independent public company. He said, great, and literally within a week, a recruiter called me and asked me if I would be interested in the Unitrin seat. So now this was, 12, 15 years ago. So, but I think things like that still happen. I don't want to pretend that they don't. So it really was in that case, an old boy network that worked for me.
So Marla, what was your first board opportunity, and how did you receive it?
My first board opportunity was a company called Visteon. It was a spinoff of Ford, kind of the sister company to Delphi, if you're familiar with that, which was a spinoff of General Motors. I actually was, at the time, Senior Vice President of Financial Planning and Investor Relations for Kraft Foods. And Visteon was looking to add some board members, and they called actually someone at Philip Morris, which at the time owned Kraft, saying they were looking for a female, and they were looking for somebody who had operating experience, and I'd been the general manager of Post, and they wanted somebody who had a good financial background. And the person at Philip Morris gave him my name. I got a call from the head of non-governance, said, I'd like to fly out and see you. He did, and that was that. I wasn't really pursuing a board at the time. I thought it would be an interesting thing to do, but it kind of just happened to come my way.
Visteon is a very large company, and so I think it's fairly unusual that your first board appointment is for, what were they, $20 billion or something of that ilk. So that was magnificent. Mary?
Sure. So my first board role actually is PVH, Philips Van Heusen, which was mentioned in the introduction. And that actually happened while I was the chairman and CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi for the Americas region. It's a large global advertising agency. The call actually came from an executive recruiter, but I came to learn, and I think this is what's probably most relevant, is how the recruiter sourced me. And that was that she had inquired of her network, of her colleagues, and one was the CEO of JCPenney. and that was a client of ours at the time. I think the ask was for a woman, and because this board had historically a lot of financial executives, they were seeking someone with more of a consumer branding, marketing kind of background, and that's how that came together.
So Rhonda, I hopped over you right to the end.
Well, my first board was Colfax Corporation. I joined that about 6 years ago, and at the time I was president of Kraft Cheese. So they were looking for a female, and they were also looking for someone with operating P&L experience. So that was the division presidency. The other thing, though, Colfax is a global industrial manufacturing company, and they have grown through acquisition and had a big portfolio or stable of brands. And they were in the process of trying to figure out, what do they do with all these brands? Do they consolidate? Do they keep them? So my branding and marketing experience also appealed to them. Similar to, I think, Marla and Mary, I wasn't looking for a board seat at the time, but I got a call from a recruiter. And again, similarly, someone had mentioned to this recruiter that they should talk to Rhonda Jordan. She might be interested. So I went into the process sort of naive, but it has ended up being a fabulous opportunity and a springboard to other board positions that I've taken since then.
That's great. And I think, Attorney, while you didn't mention this specifically, my understanding is that all of the board seats that come open, roughly 70% of them are filled through networking of some kind. It may be that a board member recommends your name, or it could be that your name is recommended to a search firm. So it's really important that you keep your networks active. Marla, from experience you've had on boards, what do you think boards are looking for?
I think that's a hard question to answer in some ways. My experience has been usually boards are looking for certain skills. They don't want everyone on their board to be a CFO. They want a wide variety of skills on their board. And so when they go to look to fill a board seat, usually they sit down, and I've done this as part of a board. When you're on the nominating governance committee, we sit down and say, really, what are the kind of characteristics we're looking for to fill? And so sometimes, they're looking for a strong financial expert. Sometimes they're looking for somebody who has expert in e-commerce. Sometimes they want a sitting CEO. So it really does depend, but I think each board is really looking to get a wide variety of experiences. And so in the boardroom, when you've got 8 or 10 or 12 people around the table, everybody's coming from a different perspective, can really add value to the board conversation. So I think there's a lot of skills you can have that can really play very well into the boardroom.
So Rhonda, I'll just move down the line.
Okay.
What are your thoughts from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, at least my personal experience has been that my marketing background, my operating experience for several different divisions, and then more recently my health and wellness experience at Kraft was particularly appealing to food companies. So I'm on 3 boards. One has nothing to do with food. One is a value-added food ingredients company, that's Ingredion, and Bush Beans obviously is food. So for the latter 2, they really liked my food experience, but in particular my health and wellness experience. And as all of you know, people's eating habits have changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years, and big food companies are constantly trying to figure out what they need to do to stay ahead of the curve or to get with the curve. So that experience in particular was helpful. Now that I'm on the other side of the table, though, for boards, I'd say the couple of things that come up quite a bit when we're looking for new board members is global experience. Everybody would love to have global experience because it's a global world. And it sounds like it would be easy, but when you get into the mechanics of someone traveling from Beijing 5 times a year, it's not quite as easy as it seems. So global experience is very much in demand and a hard thing to get sometimes. And then the other one is digital and social media. That's a big deal, particularly for companies in the consumer space, and they really want to get expert advice on that whole arena. So those are the couple of things I've seen lately.
So Mary, what would you add?
Well, I would echo the things that have been said, and I won't repeat them for myself. For both PVH, which has grown significantly via acquisition by adding Tommy Hilfiger to a portfolio that had men's dress furnishing, and then Calvin Klein, and then most recently bought Warnaco. My host Real Estate Investment Trust board was also interested in consumer and branding experience. Also, anything that feels like a bit of experience and I say feels like it because it's such a constantly evolving field, but some insight into the landscape that is digital and social and things like that. So actual functional experience. And then I've also noticed that sometimes a board will have the need to fill a spot on a given committee, and that makes a difference. So if they really need someone to join the audit committee at the moment, that's going to filter into the equation. They'll need a financial expert, whereas I'm seeing a growing interest in corporate social responsibility, and so, companies really taking that as a quite serious part of the board as well as the management's team's remit. And so if there's some affinity or experience in the area of corporate social responsibility, either workers' rights, the environment, health and wellness, all kinds of things like that, that can help a lot. International and global, absolutely. That's just becoming a really, really important thing that they look for. But it's timing, because at a given time, because of retirements or various moves within a board, it's going to be either a committee membership or a certain functionality, or a woman or a man, depending on the moment.
Anne, any other thoughts?
And the only thing I would add is, and Tyranny, you mentioned it, cybersecurity, right, is becoming increasingly important. I actually, even though I'm a CFO, I don't sit on audit committees on either Hanes or Groupon. I've managed to move on, so to speak. And I do think critical. I want to get on the nominating committee, because you can have a greater impact there. The other thing, though, I think that you see, and I think this can create a bit of an issue for people looking for their first board, is they're looking for somebody with board experience, right? And so that can become a bit of a challenge. And so you need to make sure that in that respect you can be referenced by somebody, at a very senior level who will vouch for your, likelihood to behave in the boardroom. So
It's very interesting, I guess, to lend support to cybersecurity. Of the two boards that I've been on the longest, the CIO has done presentations 3 times in the last 18 months on cybersecurity, in terms of what the issues are, what the threats are, and what they're doing to address it. And with this last board position I just received, Brunswick, I went through 7 interviews. The executives and boards, they were very diligent about checking backgrounds and references and all of that in a very careful selection process. Mary, how have you built your board portfolio? You've talked about that a little bit, but where have the opportunities come from after you've taken your first board seat?
Well, the second one came in a similar fashion, again through an executive recruiter who was doing the search for host and looking for, again, a seasoned marketer that had some international experience. But probably the most interesting, in a certain sense, and segueing into another topic a little bit, is when I added the third board seat, which is very, very different. And it's a private equity portfolio company, much smaller, and a very different role. That came purely through networking. A colleague who I worked with on marketing projects who was aware of this portfolio company needing a director, and they really wanted someone who was a marketer. And that functional expertise, when you get to a much smaller company, then that functional expertise actually becomes functional, because highly functional, because you're asked to do a whole lot more.
So Anne, how did you end up with your second or third board seat?
it was networking. My next board seat was Hanes Brands, and I actually used to work. That Hanes Brands was a spin out of Sara Lee. When I left Sara Lee, I became independent with respect to Hanes. I had worked for him in a previous role at Sara Lee, so it was that. Now they had a grid and they used a recruiter, and I still had to go through all the, but it was just, we knew each other. And in the case of Groupon, it was a referral it wasn't, no recruiter was involved, but it was somebody who knew me. They were looking for somebody with certain characteristics, and that's how that conversation started.
Interesting. Marla, how did it work for you?
I really just let people know that, I was interested in getting more board roles. When I was working full-time, which I'm not now, but when I was still CEO of Pampered Chef, to me, the max I could do was 2. So that's, I didn't want to do anymore. I got a lot of calls to do more, but didn't want to do more. Once I left there, I kind of just let people know, hey, I would be really interested in taking on, another board opportunity. But I also made it clear I'm not just looking to take on anything. I want to take things where, I feel like I can add value, it'll be a good fit for me, and something I would have some interest in. So, I find that the basic networking is really, really helpful in the process, and letting people know what you really want to do.
Yeah, Rhonda?
Yeah, all of my board experiences have come through either people I knew who referred me to a search firm or people who referred me to the company directly. And the one thing I would build on that Marla just said, when I retired from Kraft, I had been on one board because that's all you could do. But I thought, well, if something comes up, I'll join another board or more. And a few friends gave me the advice, don't jump it or don't try and fill up your dance card too quickly, because they said a lot of things will come up and you want to make sure that you're picking the things that you really want to do. And I got a lot of calls from recruiters about board positions, but it really was interesting in that first year talking with a range of people. I got a feel for what I did and didn't want to do. And there were a number of things that I was really upfront and said, honestly, it's just not the right thing for me right now. So waiting for, I know it sounds hard, but even for your first board, making sure that it's a company you like or a strategy you find interesting, I think is really important, because boards are not something you get on and off of easily, and you're signing up for a number of years, and you want to make sure it's something that's appealing to you.
Yeah, that's really important. So, Mary, how important is nonprofit board experience?
Well, I think it, in general, is very important, maybe not in the quest for a company board seat. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I truly believe that the reason you choose to serve on a not-for-profit board is because you want to you care deeply about the cause and you want to donate your time, and frankly, often ask for resources as well. So choose those to do that for that reason. If a not-for-profit board, though, can be a great place to network and meet people who are directors or are on management teams of companies. And so I think that's a really important opportunity to network. Having said that, be aware that you're going to have to really perform, right? Not just be on the board. So, it really is, it's best, I think, to make sure that you're really interested and can give the time and commitment to do a good job, and hence there could possibly be a referral or network opportunity. A university board, I had the great pleasure before I became a staff member at Northwestern of being a trustee. That's the kind of board where I could see it being very helpful in the quest for a corporate board seat. And that's because a university really operates a lot more like a business. There's real governance, there's and they're just people that are on the board because of their roles in local and national and increasingly global companies. But again, you really have to be prepared to commit and participate.
Anne?
I agree. It's valuable potentially for networking, but not in my mind, the experience per se, in terms of how a nonprofit operates.
Marla?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot to add from that. I would agree. I think the thing is, if you're going to be on a not-for-profit board, you need to be on a not-for-profit board and be committed to working hard and doing the job, because probably the worst thing that can happen to you is if you go on one and then you don't perform. Everyone knows that. So.
Yeah. Rhonda, anything else to add?
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would certainly agree, Mary, with all your comments as well. Actually, my second board opportunity came through a university board. But you're absolutely right. You have to be there and be seen as a professional and be committed to being a performer, if you will, to earn the respect. And I think most importantly, as you commit to a nonprofit board, and it has to be something you love and you're willing to donate resource to, look around and see who else is on that board. Because if you have choices of 1 or 2 or 3 different nonprofit boards, you can help yourself along the way also through your networking if you've got other influential people who sit on that board. I guess last question, and we're back to you. And I think key for this audience, for women who will not be a CEO or CFO, how should they think about board opportunities?
I think, think about the skill set that you have, and then try and find the right opportunity that likely needs that skill set. Another network member, Kathleen Cronin, recently joined the Unitron/Kemper board. She's the general counsel and head of market reg at the CME Group, and her insurance is regulated. Her experience in a regulated industry, as well as experience with IT security, was very relevant for that company. So figure out, again, somebody mentioned, which I agree, digital. Somebody who understands digital, from selling digitally to marketing digitally. There will be companies where that will be extremely attractive to. Others, maybe not so much, but there'll be some. And so to try and figure out what your skill set is, and then figure out a way to, market it, if you will, to those companies or those types of companies via your network.
So Marla, what advice would you give?
Similar advice, kind of take stock of what your skill set really is. And, in some ways, I think a lot of times we want to make our skill set seem much more general. Like, I've done a lot of things, so I'm really wide. Sometimes the boards are really looking for deep. They want somebody who really knows a certain area, a certain industry. And so, try to think of how you would market the things that you've done. And don't be apologetic for being, an expert in a certain area. That's a good thing. It can actually serve you very well, especially to getting that first board seat. So I would just kind of take stock of what you've done in your background, and I hate to say be proud out loud, but be proud of what you've accomplished.
Rhonda?
I think cast a wide net. So I mentioned when I had joined my first board, I wasn't thinking about boards. I wasn't aware that I was, but not in the context of boards, that there are public companies and private equity and family businesses. There are lots of opportunities out there. So don't go in thinking I have to have a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 1000. Look at the broad spectrum. That said, it's hard to do because you don't always hear about all of those opportunities, which gets back to telling everybody you know that you're interested and why. Give them the short elevator speech so that they can play back for other people if they hear about something. Oh, well, sure, Jane said, or Jane would be really good, and she is this, this, and this. The other thing, it was interesting, a friend of mine asked me to talk to a friend of hers who's a CFO of a Chicago-based company, and we got together, and she said, well, I joined a lot of women executive networking groups, and I'm talking to a lot of women, and I sat back and I went, you need to talk to the men too. Unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, they hold 70% of the seats? It's a lot. So you're leaving out a wide group of people that could help you. So don't be afraid to network with the men in addition to the women.
Mary, any other thoughts?
I agree with everything that's been said, particularly tell people, make people aware. Don't expect people are going to go and find you necessarily. But there's something interesting around currency. And by that, I don't mean the money, but that you're actually in a job working. I know on one of the boards, big boards I'm on, the CEO is really intent on having people that, like he, are actively working. And he's had a number of people retire or move to slightly different fields. And so I know on his mind is, I'd really like someone that's currently in the trenches. And an interesting thought is businesses that are in transition, because so many businesses, all in many, many categories, are morphing and changing at rapid pace because of digital and because of international expansion and a whole lot, and new consumers with different habits and mindsets. And so if you can tee up your relevant experience in the context of having helped in a pivotal way an organization make rapid change and extreme change, I think that's very appealing, actually being in the environment today, which will be differentiating versus a lot of sitting directors, and in an environment that's changing and playing a role in that.
So, just to add, Mary, to your comments, I think what is a challenge is that a lot of boards are looking for active CEOs or other executives, but there are only so many boards that one can commit to as an active employee. And so, my advice, and frankly, I did this before I retired from ITW, is to start, if you're interested in another board seat, start working on that while you're still working in your last, say, year. Get resumes out, contact people, let them know while you're still engaged, because they will be much more attracted to you, and frankly, your network will be stronger at that point than after you retire.